Alright, so listen. Blueface just went on live and did something a boyfriend cannot come back from. He didn't fight her. He didn't leave her. He didn't even raise his voice at her. He did something worse. He sat next to his 18-week pregnant girlfriend, looked into a live camera, and calmly delivered a lecture explaining why he is allowed to cheat on her. And he didn't stumble into it. He walked in with a slideshow. He built a whole vocabulary for it. He even gave the philosophy a name. If you caught this live, you already know the moment. If you didn't, buckle in, because what he did on that stream is going to be studied in comment sections for the next 12 months. This is not another Blueface headline. This is the one where the mask stopped being a mask. Hit that subscribe, tap the like, ring the bell, because part 2 of what Nivea does next is already loading, and you're going to want to be in the room for it. Let's get in. Before I lay out what happened on that stream, I need you to sit with one line first. One sentence. The sentence that Blueface said out loud, on camera, into a hot mic, in front of his pregnant girlfriend, and refused to walk back. Blueface said, and I want you to hear this exactly the way he delivered it, flat, no shame in it, only cracked her once. Don't worry about her. That was Blueface talking about Nivea, the mother of his soon-to-arrive third child, on a stream that thousands of people were watching in real time. Only cracked her once. Don't worry about her. Read that again. That's not a slip. That's not a bar. That's a policy statement. And that is the sentence the whole rest of this story is built on top of. Alright, so here is the setup. This past week, Blueface, legal name Jonathan Michael Porter, 28, out of Los Angeles, went live from his own stream with Nivea Kiera, his pregnant girlfriend, expecting his third confirmed child, reportedly due this August. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't cornered. He wasn't ambushed. He sat down with the camera on and, in front of a live chat that watched the whole thing in real time, laid out, clinically, patiently, like he was reading a policy memo, exactly why he treats her the way he treats her. He had a framework ready. And here is where it gets ugly, because the trigger for all of this is an outside man. Nivea's ex, an LA rapper who goes by Taboo, also known online as Supernova, had spent the previous week dragging her name across every platform he could log into. Old stories. Old accusations. Old receipts, real or invented, dumped one after the other into a timeline that was already loaded. Taboo's version, per his own post that got documented by outlets like Hot New Hip Hop and echoed across the blogs, is that Nivea was allegedly homeless when the two of them were linking. He said she was showing up to his place with her son and her cat, and to him, his words, that meant she had no permanent address. He doubled down according to the Shade Room's write-up with a line that spread fast, "Why would you get a cat if you don't have cat litter first?" That's the level of contempt Taboo brought. That's the fuel he was working with when he sat down for that stream. And Nivea, to her credit, did not let that framing stand unanswered. Nivea's counter, direct from the same live, in her own voice, on record, was that she was the one covering meals. Nivea said she was the one taking Taboo out on dates. Nivea said Taboo tried to pay her for a kiss and she turned him down. That is a receipt she brought to the room. That is Nivea saying, in real time, in front of her pregnant belly, that Taboo's version of history is upside down. And Blueface, who is supposed to be her partner, who is supposed to be the man in the corner, sat right next to her and casually co-signed Taboo's version anyway. He said, his words, "It seems like all your stories start the same and end the same." He said they was on my line. That is not a boyfriend. That is a prosecutor who forgot which side of the courtroom he is standing on. Give Nivea this much. She showed up. Nivea sat next to him. Nivea didn't hide. Nivea defended herself on camera. She looked into the same lens and said, plainly, some men understand that women change, they don't stay stuck in who they used to be. And Blueface's response, this is the part one want you to feel, was not a defense of her. Was not a hug. Was not a, "We'll get through this." Blueface's response was flat. Almost bored. Almost proud. He said, and this is verbatim, "A layman does not care about the past. A real one wild." That is the framework he was working from. In Blueface's head, the men who accept Nivea for who she is now, without punishment for who she was 5 years ago, are laymen. Amateurs. Weak links. And in his own reading of himself, he is the professional. The one qualified to keep score. He looked at his pregnant girlfriend and said a real one doesn't care about the past. And then he explained, on stream, that Nivea's past means she is not one of them. Now watch what Blueface built next, because this is where the linguistics get sinister. Because Blueface is not throwing insults. Blueface is building a taxonomy. Blueface is sorting human beings into buckets, solid, liquid, layman, real one, and he is doing it with the calm cadence of somebody teaching a class. That is what makes it stick. Insults burn off in a day. Vocabulary lives forever. Blueface invented a category. He said there are 2 kinds of people in a relationship, solid ones and liquid ones. In his framing, a liquid partner just goes along with whatever their person did before them, they let the past dissolve, they don't push back, they don't demand accountability. He said a liquid partner is watery. You can walk through them. And a solid partner, according to him, is the one who holds the line. The barrier. The one who makes the other person feel the consequence of their decisions. His exact framing was, a real one is going to hold you accountable and let you know throughout the whole pregnancy, hey, this decision you made right here was not solid. And this is why we make both decisions, and this is why you're getting both results. Both. Both. That's the word he built the whole night around. Both decisions. Both results. He said it enough times that the chat started clipping it in real time. He said it enough times that within 24 hours somebody had it on a t-shirt. That's not an outburst. That's marketing. Nobody repeats a phrase that hard unless they know it's landing. Now hold on. Back up. This is the part that is the part. Because he is not just doing this to Nivea. He is narrating it. On a live stream. To an audience. While she is carrying his kid. This is not a private failing that leaked. This is a broadcast strategy. He stood in front of a live chat and told the internet, in advance, that he was about to be a bad partner, and he had a philosophical justification pre-written. That's not a boyfriend having a bad night. That's a man performing his own villain arc for content. And real quick, because I know some of you are already in the comments typing this, Blueface is on record from an earlier moment saying he only cracked her once, don't worry about her, in reference to Nivea. Sit with that phrase for a second. Only cracked her once. That is the sentence that quietly reframes everything else on the stream. Because if that is the baseline, if only cracked her once is the metric Blueface uses to declare a relationship healthy, then the solid versus liquid speech is not philosophy. The solid versus liquid speech is self-justification with a thesaurus. Blueface is not teaching anybody anything. Blueface is doing damage control on a live camera and hoping the vocabulary is loud enough that the audience does not notice the bruise underneath it. And here is the part the timeline glossed over. The timing of this is not random. Rewind. Per the Instagram breakdown that came from his own stream, Nivea confirmed she is around 18 to 19 weeks pregnant, counting from her last period in November of last year. Do the math on that conception window. Now line it up against when Taboo went public with his "she was staying at my crib" claim. Now stack on top of that the fact that not one, not two, but 3 separate men have been hinting online that they could potentially be the father of this baby, Taboo, Supernova, and a third figure whose name is still bouncing around the blogs, which Instagram footage of Nivea's response confirms she is now consulting legal counsel over. She has already, on the record, agreed to a DNA test. Who are these 3 men? Let me name what has been named. Taboo. Supernova, which some tracking accounts insist is the same person under a second handle, others insist is a second man entirely. And a third rapper whose handle is still being scrubbed from the timeline as we speak. 3 men. 1 pregnancy. 1 baby coming in August. And the man who is publicly claiming this baby is not on the front lines defending his family. Blueface is on stream inventing new categories of masculinity to explain why he keeps playing in her face. Now look at what he did with all of that. Blueface didn't lose his mind when the exposé first dropped. He went quiet. Almost strategic quiet. And then, once the noise settled and he had the room's attention, he announced on stream that that was the moment he decided to change how he treats Nivea. Not a breakup. Not a walk away. Not a demand for the test she has already agreed to. A recalibration. He is calling it a life lesson. What it looks like from the outside is a man calmly building a permission structure for himself to cheat in front of an audience on a pregnant partner and get the internet to nod along. That's not accountability. That's PR. Here's the forensic problem with the whole solid versus liquid framework. He never, not one time across the entire stream, argues that his own past should be measured by the same yardstick. Not once. This is a man whose Hollywood Unlocked timeline reads like a warning label. Let me walk you through this receipt by receipt so nobody in the comments can pretend the pattern is not documented. He has publicly disowned a child, then unclaimed and reclaimed him. He reconciled with an ex who allegedly stabbed him. He cycled between Chrisian Rock and Jaden Alexis in a loop the internet documented for years. Blueface is now on his 3rd confirmed child with a 3rd woman, first with Jaden, then again with Jaden, and now with Nivea. This is a man who has spent years running the same loop and getting shocked when the loop closes on him. If the metric is solid versus liquid, Blueface is a puddle. He is a whole reservoir. But in his framework, the rule only applies downward. Only toward Nivea. That is not a philosophy. That is a one-way mirror. And catch this, because this is the moment the whole stream tips from ugly into something worse. When Nivea started defining what a solid partner actually looks like, and she was making sense, she was making the argument he set up for her to lose, his response was not to engage her logic. His response was to call her masculine. Because in the framework he built, a woman who defends herself with a coherent argument is no longer a woman to him. That's masculine right there, he said. You talking over me. Meanwhile he had been talking over her for 40 solid minutes. The trap is designed so she cannot win it. That's not a debate. That's a cage. And he built it in public. Different corners of the internet ran different plays on this one, and I want you to see how the framing shifted depending on who was telling it. The blogs, the shade room, all about the tea, the bigger aggregators, mostly stayed on the surface fireworks. Who said what? Which clip went viral? The shade room's write-up on his mother, Carlisa, actually pivoted the whole story sideways. Carlisa went viral for saying Nivea lacked father figure guidance, which turned the conversation from his behavior to Nivea's upbringing. That is a choice. That is a sneaky pivot, and it moved a lot of the heat off him exactly when the heat was climbing. The Team Blueface corners, you know the ones, leaned all the way into the life lesson framing. Screenshots of his stream monologues went up like TED Talks. He's teaching her, they said. Whole comment section started calling him a philosopher. The counter camp, honestly the loudest camp, read it correctly. This is textbook manipulation dressed up in Twitch vocabulary. And the way you know the manipulation is working is that he is not being called a bad boyfriend in his own comment section. He is being called a thinker, that's the tell. When the abuse gets philosophical enough, the audience mistakes it for insight. That's not new. That's a playbook that runs from cult leaders to pickup artists to whatever we are calling this era of stream philosophy. Blueface just happens to be running it on a pregnant woman. Now the Steelman would go something like this: if Nivea really did what these men are saying, isn't he entitled to react? Steelman granted. React. Break up. Walk away. Demand the DNA test, which, again, she already agreed to. What he chose instead was to stay, cheat, broadcast the cheating, and monetize the humiliation. That is not a reaction. That is a strategy. And I want to draw a line under this before we move on. There are men in his exact demographic who have handled worse allegations with more dignity. There are rappers on the same coast, same tax bracket, same public exposure, who saw a paternity question and handled it privately with a lab and a lawyer and never once used their pregnant partner as content. He had every option available. He picked the loudest one. That is a choice. That is not chaos. That is a choice. And the vibe in the room right now is turning. Even fans who rode with him through the Krasian era are logging off this one. There is a difference between chaos and cruelty. This stream crossed the line. And here is where I want you to pause and actually feel the room. Because on that live, while Blueface was lecturing, there is a moment, you can find it in the clips, where Nivea just stops. She stops arguing. She stops defending. She stops explaining. She just sits there, hand on her belly, and lets him finish. That silence is doing more damage to Blueface's public image than any of Taboo's tweets. Because in that silence, the entire audience finally sees who the adult in the room is, and it is not the one holding the microphone. Alright, here's the read nobody is saying out loud. The mainstream take is that Blueface is just being Blueface. Same movie, new co-star. That is the comfortable read. Try this one instead. What if the life lesson framework was never about Nivea at all? What if the life lesson framework is inventory management? Follow this. Blueface is a rapper whose musical relevance has been sliding for years. The Wikipedia trajectory reads the same way most fading rapper trajectories do. Boxing pivot. Reality show pivot. Podcast pivot. Live stream pivot. Every pivot a smaller platform than the last. What he still has, undeniably, is engagement. Streams. Clips. Reaction videos. Blogs quoting him for free. The Blueface cinematic universe is a content engine, and the fuel is drama. Now, a boyfriend who publicly humiliates his pregnant girlfriend on stream and invents a whole vocabulary to justify it. That is clip gold for weeks. That is 10 reaction channels eating for a month. That is an algorithmic buffet. Every single clip channel, every reaction commentator, every gossip aggregator, every daytime blog show, they are all eating off of his stream. The Shade Room got their post. Hot New Hip Hop got their post. Hollywood Unlocked got their segment. TikTok clip farms are cutting the both decisions moment into 30-second edits with a drill beat over it. And the guy at the center of all of it does not have to pay a single one of them. That is the trade. Nivea's dignity for his engagement metrics. That is the contract Blueface signed the moment he hit go live. Which is why the solid versus liquid framing was not for Nivea. That framing was for the timeline. Those are memes designed to spread. Somebody has already put both decisions on merch. Somebody else is already using he liquid as an insult in the group chat. The vocabulary is the product. And if the vocabulary catches, the story never dies, which means his streams keep running, the sub count keeps climbing, and the ecosystem keeps feeding. Nivea is not the audience. Nivea is a set piece. Which is grim, because the person carrying his child is being cast as a supporting character in her own life on a live broadcast. And the sharper you look at the footage, the more it seems like everyone in that room understood it except her. She was fighting for a relationship. He was writing a season finale. And Nivea did not sign up to be a supporting character in her own pregnancy. Nivea did not agree to be a plot point. Nivea walked into that stream thinking she was going to defend her name against her ex, and she walked out realizing her own boyfriend had been quietly writing her scenes for weeks. The opposition to this read is going to say I'm reaching. They're going to say he is just wired this way, no strategy, no plan, pure impulse. Fair. He is absolutely capable of pure impulse. But the repetition is what gives him away. Every serious moment on that stream, he pivoted back to the coined phrases. Both decisions. Liquid. Solid. Both results. You do not repeat vocabulary that hard unless you know it is landing. He knows. Blueface is not toxic by accident. He is toxic on brand. And that phrase, toxic on brand, that's not a compliment. That's a diagnosis. When a person's cruelty becomes marketable, the cruelty stops being a bug and starts being a feature. Blueface has looked at his own worst behavior, run the analytics, and decided the worst version of himself is the version that pays. That is what he is monetizing on that live. That is the actual product on the shelf. Now, where does this actually go? Let me give you two paths. Path 1, the most likely. Nivea has the baby in August. The DNA test clears the paternity noise. And she and Blueface stay stuck in a loop for another 6 to 8 months of on-again, off-again content before the proper explosion arrives. That pattern is already on file across 3 prior relationships of his. Same beats. Same escalation. Same eventual TMZ headline. Krasian Rock got that arc, Jaden Alexis got that arc, Nivea, if nothing changes, is next in the rotation. Watch how fast the life lesson framing gets abandoned the moment the baby is actually here, because that vocabulary only works while Nivea is being cast as the villain. Once there's a newborn in the picture, the internet's patience for his philosopher act evaporates overnight. Path 2, the one that flips everything. Nivea walks. Not tomorrow. Not next month. But once the child is born and she has a legal foothold via child support, don't be shocked if the "I don't care what he does" energy she is projecting right now reveals itself, in hindsight, as a stall tactic. Women who publicly minimize damage on stream are almost always privately building an exit. And once Nivea is out, this whole solid versus liquid doctrine collapses instantly, because the entire framework depended on her staying to be lectured. No student, no professor. And Blueface becomes just a guy who said both a lot in the year of our Lord 2026. And here is the aftershock nobody is thinking about. 5 years from now, this is the part that lingers, that baby is going to grow up, and at some point that child is going to watch these clips. All of them. The "I'll be the bad guy" monologues. The public humiliation. The "you're not a solid person" speech delivered to their pregnant mother in front of a live audience. And whatever he builds between now and then had better be a redemption arc for the ages, because the archive is the archive. YouTube does not forget. His next relationship, and there will be a next relationship, will get compared to this one before it even starts. Every woman who dates him from this point forward walks in with the entire Nivea footage as required reading. Every business that considers a brand deal with him from this point forward pulls up this clip first. Every reality show casting call, every podcast booking, every collab opportunity, the both decisions monologue is now a permanent Google result attached to his name. He didn't just embarrass Nivea on that stream. He downgraded his own market value in real time and thought he was building it. The life lesson he thought he was teaching Nivea, he was actually publishing his own scouting report. Cool trick, philosopher. You lectured yourself into a corner. Now let me hand this to you, because I want to know where you land. Cook or got cooked? Was Blueface running game, or was he running a con on himself? Drop your read in the comments, I'm reading every single one. If you think Nivea walks after the baby drops, type she gone. If you think she stays and this loop runs another year, type stuck. And if you think Blueface actually believes his own framework, that this is not strategy, this is just how he is wired, type puddle, because that is the read I want to see. Fight it out in the replies. Part 2 on Nivea's counter-strategy, what she is quietly building, who is texting her behind the scenes, and why the DNA test timing is not an accident, is already loading. Hit subscribe so it lands in your feed the second it drops. Tap the like if this hit different than the recycled versions floating around. And ring the bell because this story is not close to over. The paternity results alone are going to break the internet in half. That's the read. I'll catch you in the next one.